Okay, welcome into today's LockedIn Match Challenge. And today here we have Mantasa from Dubai, UAE, right? Is it?
Hello, everyone.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So Mantasa, go on and introduce yourself. Yeah, feel free.
Hey, everyone. I'm 16. I'm Mantasa, and today I'm going to be speaking about something that some of us may face, some of us may not. It's actually a topic that isn't talked much about. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Now, has anyone ever wondered looking at someone who is going through something hard and be like, oh, why can't they get through it or they can't keep a track of it? Or perhaps you might have said it to yourself as well that, why can't I move on or why am I reacting so much? Right? I'm pretty sure all of us have gone through it at some point of time, or at least some of us. So the answer is that no, it's not a character flaw, it's not a weakness, it's biology. And that is exactly what I'm going to be speaking on about today. Why some people break under pressure and how the brain heals. So, before I get into the science, I want to ground how common it is actually to feel all of this stuff because many people feel that they're alone. So, one in every three adults experience a traumatic experience, that experience a traumatic event significant enough to affect their mental health, and about 70% of them um, have experienced like at least one of them, right? And out of those 70%, 46% of those people have never received any treatment. And you know what the most shocking factor is? 90% of our brain's development happens before the age of 5, where you don't even know how to speak, you don't know your basics, you don't know, you basically don't know anything because you're a child. You know, you're the most vulnerable at that age. So, how do we end up in these states? So, there are many reasons, but most common reasons are unresolved pain, grief or trauma of losing someone, or a specific incident that happens that keeps repeating and you're scared of it, or when there's a toxic environment, when you don't feel safe internally, you cannot do anything externally, right? Or it could be as simple as modern lifestyle and loss of purpose, constant doom scrolling, constant comparison, no downtime, poor sleep. All of this affects your brain in a way that you don't realize. It hollows you out from the inside, even when you look fine from outside. So what exactly happens is the stressor hits, right? So there's like uncertainty in your work relationships, in your personal relationships, or there's a certain loss you're going through, right? But even initially you don't really care about it. You're like, okay, it's fine. I'm gonna grind through it. You know, just process through it, and you just like don't trust. You don't give yourself the time you need to. So there are warning signs that come after that. For example, you feel you snap easily, you're annoyed, but then again those signs get ignored. You're like, it's okay, I just need to like focus and go with the grind and everything. But that is when the system backfires. Your system overloads, and you either reach in fight mode or survival mode. Now, what are these two modes? There are fight mode and survival mode, right? So fight mode happens when you snap at people easily, and you have this tension inside you, that restlessness that you need to get it done, or it's not gonna be perfect. You have the perfectionism chase in you. It's like wired inside of you that you need to get it done, and then you just cannot let anything go, and it eventually messes up with your brain because now you're not at peace, you're not getting your work done, and you're stuck in a loop and you can't do anything about it, right? On the other hand, survival mode is when you're numb. You just cannot do anything, right? You just try to get through the day. You feel disconnected from people, yourself, and you lose interest in everything, and you're just running on autopilot. So now let us talk about the root cause, right? Because everything does not happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. It all happens bit by bit, right? So now, when you're a child, as I mentioned earlier, that 90% of the brain development happens before the age of 5. Now, when you're a child, you can't regulate big emotions alone. you need a caregiver to soothe you, to show that pain is survivable, and like how to actually go about it in a way that secures your foundation, how you process your emotions and how you uh, express yourself, right? That is called co-regulation. But when that is absent, when that particular factor is absent, you develop attachment patterns which aren't personality flaws. They're basically survival strategies that made sense at that particular time because internally you're still in that age, right? You haven't grown out of it because your brain has been wired at it. So the three types of attachment styles are anxious type attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. So anxious attachment is when you require constant reassurance, right? Because love was unpredictable. So now you cling on to every little bit you get. Right? Avoidant attachment is basically the one we did at fight mode, where you pretend that you're fine because every time you weren't, emotions were dismissed. You basically avoid everything because you haven't learned how to hold pain without collapsing. And once you collapse, there is no way out of it, right? So you tend to just ignore everything and you're avoidant about it. And then last but not the least is disorganized attachment is when you know what's happening inside of you. You're aware of how the pattern works, but that fear is still inside of you. You cannot like separate yourself without it. But there's a very very hopeful thing, and that is neuroplasticity. Our brain works like plastic. So basically, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself by forming new connections throughout the entire life. So I believe our brain has about 86 billion neurons, right? And they're all connected through synapse, which is the gap between neurons. So there are two major. So basically, the Hebb's law that was established in 1949 states that neurons that fire together wire together. So every time you do something that makes two neurons ignite, it's like you're making yourself away and you know how to get about it, right? So also the flip side of it is a very important part of what we're discussing. Neurons that fire apart wire apart. So connections you stop using weaken and put in away, right? So the old patterns, for example, you've done something, there's an old pattern that you want to break off, so you'd be doing the exact opposite time and time again in order to break it. So for example, a very common example would be, for example, writing the date in your notebook, right? So when it's New Year and you're writing 2025, and then suddenly it's time to do 2026, so you kept changing it, right? At one point of time you'll directly write 2026 instead of 2025 because you're constantly changing it. It happens only through repetitive exercises, right? You need to like experience it again and again. So now there are two key players in your brain, your prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is basically your inner adult. It does all the adult stuff. It's responsible for emotional regulation, empathy, planning ahead, and all of that. And it fully matures around the age of 25. Now, the amygdala is basically the sensor in your brain. It's the smoke alarm. It's like, it detects threat instantly and it triggers flight or freeze response, right? And it cannot tell the difference between real or perceived danger. It just works in at the moment according to the situation it feels like, right? If it's threatened, then it goes accordingly. It does not do anything. Your prefrontal cortex does not work at that point of time. Now, how does stress hijack your brain? So now we're going to understand the science behind the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala when you're under stress. So basically, when threat is detected, your amygdala it fires instantly, right? Now the PFC does not know what's happening, and the cortisol and the adrenaline level in your body rises up, right? The PFC goes offline, and then rational thinking weakens. The emotional brain takes over, and now you're focused on how to get through it instead of actually like rationally thinking about how to go about it, right? So the pattern gets wired in. If this happens time and time again, it gets permanently carved. The alarm stays on. So like in order to break it down, you need to do the opposite to like make to like understand the difference when you save and you actually to actually go about it. Uh,
Oh my god, I just muted my whole thing. Just but basically, I just explained heritability, epigenetics, have more sleep, and all that. So apologies. Have a nice one.